Illinois' state budget has more than $10 billion set for the state's public pensions. And we have a $140 billion unfunded pension liability. If you look at the state auditor's numbers, it's even higher if you look at some of the various credit rating agencies and their review of the state's long-term debt. Either way, pensions obviously a big issue, especially for those tens of thousands of state employees still working and the tens of thousands who are retired getting their pensions. So just a bit of background, of course, we have pretty generous Tier 1 pension benefits in the state of Illinois that has 3% compounded interest increase every year that somebody's in retirement. There's also full subsidized health care in retirement for Tier 1 employees hired before 2020, hired before 2011. But you remember that we did the Tier 2, and that was in 2011. So any new employees got fewer benefits in retirement. And some of the other things of that particular law back then, over a decade ago, were hashed out in the Supreme Court. So now we've got this issue of we can't diminish benefits per the contract clause in the Illinois Supreme Court, which is compounding the issue of the cost of pensions. Well, state legislators in a House pension committee have been meeting to discuss how to get a hold of this, not just the overall cost of pensions, which takes about $1 out of every $5 that the state brings in taxes, but also to correct what some are seeing as a flaw in Tier 2 when it comes to being inbounds for the Social Security laws in the state and in the country. So the conversation of trying to get this right so that Tier 2 employees, when they retire, don't miss out on benefits that they should be getting because of how Tier 2 is set up. So that conversation's ongoing. But one thing about Tier 2 is they're subsidizing the retirement of Tier 1 employees. And after a certain time, that's going to be problematic. And that's been made clear now after several hearings, including one yesterday up in Chicago, where they heard from various spokespeople for pensions and laborers. You're going to hear Andrew Bodavies from the Teachers Retirement System. You're going to hear Pat Devaney from the AFL-CIO. You're also going to hear State Representative Stephen Reich, and really getting down to brass tacks as to what all of this means for the state's taxpayers and the state's pensioners when it comes to Tier 2 versus Tier 1 and the ongoing conflicts with Social Security and how Tier 2 is subsidizing Tier 1 and how that could come to a head and problematic and causing people to really have to crunch and find more funding. So there's a lot of different things going on with the pension system. Here's a little bit of yesterday's 2-hour-long hearing on pensions.
Everyone will fail. It is a question of when, not if, but given enough time for the certain circumstances. SURS has identified the one person. And not only will everyone fail eventually, but the speed at which those groups start getting huge grow exponentially. So in year 1, it's 1. In year 2, maybe, in the second year, maybe it's 5. In the third year, maybe it's 50. In the fourth year, maybe it's 500, 5,000, et cetera, and so on.
Every month, every year that we wait to solve these issues, solve the legal problems, the moral issues that we created in a benefit that doesn't provide retirement security, it's going to cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars more as we continue to create unfunded liability for benefits that we know are going to have to be changed. So again,
that the ship is listing, and right now it's listing on the basis of there being a legal problem that we have to fix, and that's the one thing I want to see done immediately is figure out, and I don't think it's impossible to fix the compliance with the safe harbor provisions. That to me is the number one job we have to do here in this thing. But having said that, the fact that our Tier 2 employees are subsidizing Tier 1 pensions as they increase 3% compounded every year, how do you propose to help us navigate the minefield of increasing benefits that if we make a wrong step, we can't take back because of the constitutional provision that says we can't diminish or impair benefits. I think that has to be, something like that needs to be on the table, because look at what we did. If we go ahead and change Tier 2 to provide pension benefits of a certain level, and then we find out we overshot the runway and we're, and here we are with something we can't take back, that's just as dangerous as not giving enough, because the taxpayers of Illinois are sooner or later going to vote with their feet. The easiest thing for us as legislators to do is to promise something that we know we are not going to be able to fulfill. And I think that's probably what happened back when Tier 2 was passed. Somebody had to know that there was something here that just wasn't going to work, but it went through anyway. I think that's the most immoral thing we as legislators can do, is to promise something to somebody. And how many times have, I've sat in appropriation committee hearings and people have come and said, we need this, we need that. And we hear legislators say, okay, we're going to support you in doing this. And then all of a sudden we find out that when the budget comes through, there's no line on there for appropriation of that.
So the issue is something that's still being debated, still being discussed. Whether or not they're going to find a resolution anytime soon, unclear. They've got a couple of bills to deal with, like the safe harbor provision for Social Security. But I mean, those are still being crafted and, amended and discussed. And so this is something that is mounting, is costing taxpayers one of every $5. And that's, in some estimates, actually continuing to underfund the pensions. Trying to get to the pension funds to be 90% funded by 2045. It's, the 20 some odd years from now. So you still have all of these issues stacking on top of each other, compounding the state's budget problems when it comes to, diverting money from, various services to fund pensions. Is it going to take a constitutional amendment to rectify this? And how do you go about keeping people whole for promises that were made in their pensions, especially with Tier 1 pensioners? So you're going to hear a lot more about this. Will it happen during veto session? You may hear a committee hearing or two, but this is, I think, really going to be something that is top of mind for legislators when they come back for the second of the 2-year term next year in January. So obviously a lot of conversations still have yet to be had about pensioners in the state of Illinois.